Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. We're so happy you're here. We have almost 600 people logged on so far from all over the world for this epic webinar with the co-authors of The Pleasure Trap, Dr. Doug Lisle and Dr. Alan Goldhammer. If you're not familiar with their work, Dr. Doug Lisle is the psychologist at both the True North Health Center as well as at the McDougall Live-In Program, both in Santa Rosa, California. And Dr. Alan Goldhammer is the co-founder of the True North Health Center in Santa Rosa, California. And they are the authors of probably the most important book of our time, The Pleasure Trap, especially important if you're somebody that wants to get healthy in a world that's designed, as Dr. Goldhammer says, to make you fat, sick, and miserable. But the purpose of this webinar is to announce that the long-awaited audio version of The Pleasure Trap is here. It's available on Amazon in this beautiful 8 CD disc. And you can also now get it in Audible form at audible.com, both in the United States and Canada. And so the authors are here to talk about the book and why it might be a good idea, even if you have the book, to consider getting the audio. So Dr. Lisle and Dr. Goldhammer are the two smartest people I've ever met since this guy living today. And thank you so much for the questions that you submitted. We're going to get to as many of them as possible. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Doug Lisle and Dr. Alan Goldhammer.
Good to see you, AJ. Just great.
It's great to see you guys. All right, good. They're big and I'm little. So thank you guys so much for taking time out of your Sunday to do this. We've got so many questions, but the first one that many people asked are, how did this project come about? How did these two great scientific minds get together and collaborate on this book? And why did you guys feel so much passion about writing this book?
Well, I think Alan, one thing that you would never know is that unless you've ever had him as your outpatient doctor, you would never know how much energy this guy puts into every patient. And early in our career, I used to come up when I was still in grad school. Actually, I'd come up when I was visit here, and I would watch him work. And people would allow me to sit in when he would work on their as a chiropractor, working on their backs and necks and so forth. And he would be super comprehensive. It would take a long time with each patient. He'd take like half an hour. And during that half hour, he would be essentially selling them on healthy living. And like he has a whole rap. He has them laughing. He has them thinking. And I can remember first time I watched this, after about the second patient, I'm thinking, he's really just showing off for me. Like, he's not going to do this all day long. There is no way this is going to happen all day long. This went on for like 8 patients. It just kept going. I'm like, oh my God. At the end of the day, he's put out this phenomenal energy to try to convince people. I mean, not only has he worked hard physically, but he's worked really hard psychologically, trying to push people into doing the right thing and making dietary lifestyle changes. And so then I got the idea, I mean, not about a book, but I got the idea about how frustrated he feels about people not taking that advice that often, having a lot of success. He would report to me, about people that would take the ball and run and do well. And but we wanted some method for essentially doing the education that he was doing, another way to reach people. And that's where The Pleasure Trap was born, out of essentially him knowing that with his own voice and his own personality, he was only going to take this message so far. And so we needed a way to do this, and The Pleasure Trap was the way that I could contribute my thinking in psychology about how to try to get this message sold in a way that people could really take it and run.
Great.
It was interesting in the development of The Pleasure Trap. I had come up with the term The Pleasure Trap, and I thought in order to allow Dr. Lisle to contribute in some way, we let him write the book. So it was actually an equal partnership in that regard. I came up with the title, he wrote the book, and it worked out quite well.
How long did it take you guys to get this book out?
It was 28 months. So we had actually worked on a previous version, and the agent said that won't fly. In other words, it was Yeah, that's what she said. And so we sat down, and it was a little bit more scientific flavor of the previous book. And Alan sat down and said, "Okay, we can't do that. What are we going to do? What is this?" And it was these chairs in his living room, and we sat down.
The green chairs.
Green chairs, the infamous green chairs. His wife would always have us shut the doors whenever we were going to sit in the green chairs, because she didn't want to hear it all the way in the bedroom. Because he gets animated. So yeah, he sat down, and at that time there had been the remaking of the movie Parent Trap, and I think that was rattling around, in the culture, and so right about that time, and so Alan sat down and he says, "It's a trap." He says, it's pleasure. So it's about people are making a mistake about pleasure. It's pleasure trap. And he hits the chair. And I'm thinking, that was too easy. It's too easy. I'm like, God, that's really good. It's really good. I guess, God, I think that's what it's going to be. That was that.
It's a great title. I don't know if you're aware, but other people have used the title for adult entertainment books since your book has come out. So sometimes they get the wrong one. It must have been such a fun experience working together like that. Was it an easy sell, the book? Because I know the book has done really well since it came out, and there's really no other book like it. Was it a tough sell to publishers to try to get this book out?
Well, I remember one of the agents, the rep, said that we needed to modify it to tell people what they wanted to hear. In other words, tell about the positive things like, red wine and dark chocolate. And then the question came up was, do we want to sell books or do we want to tell the truth? And so we said, we wanted to tell the truth. And they said to quit wasting their effing time. So,
yeah. Well, the joke's on them, because you told the truth and you still were able to sell quite a few books. So if someone's unfamiliar with the book, why might they want to get the book? And if somebody already has the book, what might be the benefit of now also owning it on an Audible form?
Well, the Pleasure Trap talks about the hidden force that undermines health and happiness. So it explains to people why people are fat, sick, and miserable. It's an important book to understand also why, even if you want to do the right thing, why it can be challenging. And more importantly, strategies to overcome some of those challenges. And The Pleasure Trap itself is a great book, but not everybody processes the written word as efficiently as orally. And so now we have this new audio version of The Pleasure Trap, which is really well done. I was so impressed.
Thank you.
With your presentation of this. And when I listened to it, I really realized, just how much easier it is to process this information when you're listening to it sometimes than when you're reading it. So I know I tend to process information more efficiently orally than through writing. And so I think for many people, this is great. Plus, you can listen to it in the car. You can make good use of your time rather than just sitting there, commuting, particularly for those people that are unfortunate enough to have to live in places like Los Angeles or Portland or Seattle, where there's a lot of traffic.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Goldhammer, because when I was reading it in the studio, even though I had read the book, I like, oh, now I get it, because I'm reading it out loud. And I do want to give a shout out to Vanessa Gilbert, a Hollywood talent agent who donated her time generously to because I couldn't have done it without a director. It's not easy to do that. And by the way, I know a lot of people wish that these authors would have done it. They didn't want to do it. That's why I got the honor. So thank you for saying that. Dr. Lyle, do you have anything to add about the learning? Like, are some people will they retain it better now that they can hear it?
I think, as Alan says, I think many people do. I'm not one of those people. So this wasn't something that would have really occurred to me, even though I knew these things were happening. And I know that you had mentioned it to me, AJ, on several occasions. And I'm just not somebody, I've never listened to an audiobook. And when I've started, I got about 3 pages in and I'm done. Whereas I now have several friends that they love this. And I'm always just astonished. So this is obviously a completely different medium for people to get this information. And I think it's great. And I'm so glad that you were assertive with us and volunteered your time and were interested, because you're a fantastic spokesperson for the message, AJ. And congratulations on being now named to the Hall of Fame, the Vegetarian Hall of Fame year.
Thank you.
Well-deserved honor.
Appreciate
The
that.
truth is, I feel like you're just beginning. You're just getting your wings under you. And so they could have done this 10 years from now, and the list of accomplishments would have been longer, but it's already deserved. Really well done. I'm proud that you were the reader of our book.
Thank you. And one of the reasons it came about really is because I volunteered at the Braille Institute, and they could not get this book on Braille. They just could not. And I was trying to get this book to my blind students that were diabetic. And so there's a certain population that this is going to really help. So thank you guys for doing that. So you mentioned, Dr. Goldhammer, that even if people know what to do, it still can be difficult. So for both of you guys, why do so many people struggle even after they know what to do and they want to do it? They come to True North, they go to the McDougall program, they're like, yeah, this is it. They found Jesus, and then they get home and
yeah. Well, this is because essentially every instinct in you is working against you. So you're the pleasure trap. There's a famous anthropologist by the name of Don Simons at UC Santa Barbara has a way of looking at concepts, presentations. He says, in order for you to understand what someone is saying, it's very useful to understand who they're arguing against. And the pleasure trap has some people that it's arguing against. And the pleasure trap is fundamentally, it's different than essentially all other books in this sort of hyper health arena, because it's really a book about the psychology of the problem. Certainly there's details, supportive details. We're telling the story of Campbell, Esselstyn, McDougall, Ornish. We're telling that story. But we're telling the story about the fact that this is a psychologically difficult challenge to embrace this information and put it to use. And the people that we are arguing against are going to be people that are going to say that the reason why you're having the problem is that there's something wrong with you, something wrong with your childhood, something wrong with your emotional life, etc. That this is conventional dynamic psychology, is going to blame the person's struggles on their own personal failures, their own lack of self-esteem, that they don't feel like they deserve to be healthy, that they've got a self-sabotaging tendency, that they don't really want this, or they've got incomplete issues that need to be worked out in therapy. The pleasure trap is really our statement that this is an incorrect way of analyzing the problem. And if you analyze the problem from that perspective, you are going to miss the truth. The truth is that this is an exceptionally difficult problem because your natural design was for a world of whole natural foods. And what you now have is a world of processed, hyper-stimulating, drug-like foods. And the problem is not that there's anything wrong with you. If you are eating trash with both hands, that means everything in your psychology is working absolutely perfectly. Okay? In order for you to go against that is a great challenge. It is essentially beating your genes. You have to go against the genetic message and have to go with something that you learn. And learning this is, it's like essentially someone who's right-handed learning how to learn to write left-handed. It is unbelievably unnatural to do it this way. And so for those of us that have made the journey, it seems simple. But that's after you spend 5,000 hours learning how to write with your left hand. If you're a right-hander, you're going to be pretty good at it, and it's going to feel like it's reasonable to do it this way. But it's 5,000 hours. It's a lot of time to get this sort of straight. And so this is who we are arguing against. This is really the point. It's a point to let you know if you're struggling with this, there's nothing wrong with you. But you have to get great attention to your environment. You have to really get a great deal of environmental control of your situation, because you essentially have been dropped into an environment now that is absolutely designed to make you fat, sick, and miserable. That's the first time I've ever used that thing.
It's about time.
I know. Finally, Rob, one of his phrases, but there you go. But it's true. That's exactly how it is.
Anything to add, Dr.
Yeah, people are addicts, and some people are addicted to alcohol, and some people are addicted to nicotine, and some people are addicted to the artificial stimulation of dopamine in the brain that comes from chemicals added to their food, and those chemicals include salt, oil, and sugar. And so it's not going to be easy.
Yeah. You've seen a lot of patients over the years at True North. How many of you actually have seen crawl out of the pleasure trap and stay there?
Well, thousands. You know, what I find, though, is if people are appropriately motivated, it's easier. And the appropriate motivation is pain, debility, and fear of death. So the sicker people are, the more miserable they are, the more, you know, interested they are in blowing their brains out to avoid the constant agony of their daily lives, the more motivated they are to consider doing something really dangerous and radical, like learning to eat well, exercise, go to bed on time, or maybe even do a fast.
Terrific. If you guys were writing the book today, would there be anything you would do differently or add?
Well, there's information that wasn't available, you know, 10 years ago that's come in light today. And so undoubtedly there would be more details. I think we probably would have addressed, you know, a number of issues that just wasn't in the forefront back then.
For example, what?
Well, there's a couple things. I can think of a few things that scroll through my mind. First of all, when my mother read it and said, you know, there was a line in there about Halloween kids laying waste to your flower beds as they seek their dopamine stimulating treats, my mom said, well, that's kind of unfriendly. And I thought, it was getting a little too sanctimonious. I might take that one back. Also, I can remember, now Alan wouldn't take it back, but I might, because I'm a lot nicer. Another one was, I can remember as we were getting, essentially summarizing the arguments at the end. And we were talking about how that it just exactly what Alan was just saying, that when we look at, we're talking about how if you do diet, a moderate exercise, fasting, sleep, if you do this, that all, you know, this huge majority of health problems will just melt away. And we argue that these prescriptions seem outlandish to modern medicine and modern health thinking. And yet, this is exactly how all of our ancestors lived, every single one of them. That's precisely how they lived. So really, our prescriptions are not outlandish at all. They're unbelievably sensible, which is why it is that they work better than anything else for almost, you know, for the vast majority of conditions. And so, but one thing I would have added, and we would have added, was sunshine. And we didn't. We thought about it, but at the time, we were a little more intimidated about the idea that sunshine and skin cancer, we're a little more worried about that than we now. Subsequent, the evidence is, hey, you know what, you're better off with more sun exposure because of the vitamin D issues, et cetera. So that would have been a nice little artistic gestalt, because then it would have been diet, exercise, sleep, fasting, and sunshine. You know, it would have been, that would have been one little improvement. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is that I think we would have emphasized even more the difference between, for example, life expectancy and healthy life expectancy. Life expectancy is how long you're going to live. We know that, you know, if you do everything right, you might live a little bit longer. But where the big difference is the ability to dramatically reduce the likelihood of debility. You know, the average person spends almost a decade ill and almost 2 decades in poor health. And people have heart attacks, they have strokes, they end up unable to talk or move, lying in nursing home beds, waiting for people to change their diaper, sometimes for years. The likelihood of that can be dramatically reduced with healthful living. And I don't know that we emphasize the tremendous benefit that this approach may have at helping people live their full potential until they reach their genetic potential, hopefully go to sleep one night and don't wake up. So not only are we emphasizing having a good life, but also being able to have a good death too.
Terrific, terrific. So we have a question from one of the participants. My husband is suffering from poor dietary choices. How can I get him to adopt a healthy diet without being a nag? I don't want to be his nursemaid after he has a stroke. His blood pressure and weight are both high.
Well, I think that if he can, there's a lot of different ways to manage this, and everybody's situation in a household is different. But I would certainly look at, for example, the division of labor in the house and where you are now, and if you're retired, etc. And there's no reason why we necessarily have to maintain all the traditional roles. So you can make your own food and not make his food. And then if he wants to make his own food, fine. But if he'll just wants to just instead by default eat your food, then his dietary habits may become substantially better because he's not really willing to go down to the store and get himself a chicken breast and then come home and break it open and then put it in the broiler and then put, barbecue sauce on it. It's just not willing to go to the trouble. So instead, the deal can be, listen, you'll empty your own trash cans instead of have him do it, and you'll mow the front yard and he'll mow the backyard, and you'll do your food and he'll do his food. Essentially, we don't have to do it quite this way, but the notion is that we can say, listen, I'm not going to do that food for you. I'm going to do this food. Yeah.
I had a patient who was traditionally had done all the food preparation in her family. And she came home after her stay at the center and explained to her husband that she was going to continue to make all the salads and vegetables and all that kind of stuff. But because she was going to be trying to go on a whole plant food SOS-free diet, it was going to be a lot easier on her not to have to be tempted with making animal food. So if he didn't mind, what she'd like to do is keep making all of the healthy foods, and he could make the meat or whatever it is that he wanted. And the first week he got the barbecue out, it was the cooking and the spare ribs. And she said by about the second or third week, it was past the lentil loaf because his energy conservation mechanisms kicked in. It was easier just to eat the lentil loaf than to have to go to the trouble. And what's interesting today is he's a more ardent vegan dieter than she is. He actually keeps her in line now. But it was mostly just not making it confrontational, but really appealing to him to help her with her issue. And her issue was she wanted to try this experiment of doing a whole plant food diet, and she didn't. Now it's worked out well for both of them. And, the point was she didn't try to impose her will on him.
Yeah. Good.
That's great. So what's the easiest way for people to escape the pleasure trap?
But before we go on, AJ, there's one other point. If it's important for somebody that their husband be, say, health-complying, health-conscious person, I think the most effective way to do that is to actually marry somebody that has that inclination. Because then, if you've married somebody that's already inclined that way, you don't have to break them in.
That's true. But some people didn't get this information until after their health was compromised. And
that's true. Although, males are particularly easier to manipulate than females. I know one of my patients wanted her husband to quit smoking, but she didn't want to impose her will on him. And she said to him, listen, dear, I appreciate that you really like to smoke, and I defend your right to do that. He was always very conscientious about it. He would smoke outside and wouldn't expose her to his toxic waste. But she said, if you're going to keep smoking, what I'd like you to do is dramatically increase your life insurance. Because with my next husband, I'd like to have a really nice standard of living. And she said that he told her that every time he went to smoke, then he pictured her with another man. It drove him crazy. He finally quit.
Nice. That's great. That's great. So how do we escape the pleasure trap?
How do we
go to north? How do we escape the pleasure trap? Not easy.
Well, the first thing is to read the pleasure trap so you understand exactly why this hidden force is so difficult and encompassing. And once you have an intellectual understanding, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to start working on trying to make improvement and hopefully improve things faster than you're getting sick. Or if you find it's just too difficult, then come to a place like the True North Health Center where you can get a little help making it happen a little bit easier.
Nice. So can fasting help people escape the pleasure trap? Or for some people that can't fast, what else can they do? Just eating the health-promoting diet?
Well, fasting makes things happen faster for some people. But if you diligently apply these principles that we lay out in the book, you're doomed to success. You will be able to master these principles. I don't come into people that are willing to put the effort in, that are willing to be consistent with it, that are willing to be conscientious about it, that aren't able to make incremental progress. Sometimes it takes a long time and you have to be patient with yourself. But I don't believe there's anybody given enough motivation and given enough support that wouldn't be able to escape the pleasure trap.
Cool. Now, you guys adopted this way of eating almost 40 years ago. So did you guys just completely avoid ever getting into the pleasure trap?
Well, I mean, I got motivated because I was being humiliated. This is fourth, fifth grade. We would play basketball every day, and every day he would beat me. And I really practiced. I thought, well, I'll practice and I'll beat him, but that didn't work. He practiced. And then when we got a little bit older, I thought, if I got healthier, then I could crush him. And so I read some books, came across Shelton and whatnot, and I decided, well, I'm going to adopt this whole plant food diet, and I'm going to just crush him. And of course, it completely failed. First of all, he adopted the same diet, and here we are even playing this morning, and beat again. I mean, so what I'm hoping, though, is, as you know, Dr. Lyle is very flexible with his diet, and once every few months he has a piece of vegan, carrot cake or something, and I'm hoping that will eventually catch up with him. And when we reach our 80s or so, he'll start to age out a little quicker, and then I'll beat him.
Right. That's terrific. But do you think you've never been in the pleasure trap, either of you, or Dr. Goldhammer? And can you identify with your patients? Because it doesn't seem like either of you have really experienced what most of us do with things like chocolate, or other people with their alcohol and cigarettes and alcohol. So the fact that you escaped it, you never actually got into it, right?
Well, I can actually remember where this all started. This started when we were about, I think it was before we were driving. So we were about 15. And my dad was a kind of open character. He was adventurous, and he was also kind of disagreeable. So he was perfectly happy with contrarian. He's one of these guys that would be telling you that it's the Apollo program was bogus. It was made up by somebody. He'd be perfectly, and if you argue with him, then you get all hostile about it. So that's kind of what he was like. And he had gotten the idea that diet was connected to health, and he had a notion that if you looked on in a bookstore and there was 20 books up there with 20 different opinions, one of those people was right, or there's a good chance they were right, but you wouldn't know which one, and it's hard to figure it out. So he had read
Psychodietetics.
Yeah, but at first he had read Adele Davis, and he was kind of lukewarm on her, and then he read Psychodietetics by Straskin and Ringstorff, and he was totally sold on it. Like this was sugar caused schizophrenia. It's like that. That was it. He was all in, and so then I became all in because I'm this kid. I'm like, my dad's right. So then I told Alan, hey, this is how it is. And I was actually the first of us to eliminate all refined sugar. And Alan then, of course, this guy's not going to get defeated in any self-discipline game. You can forget about that. So I remember a phone call. We couldn't have been more than 15 because we weren't driving. And a phone call, and he called me and he said, yeah, I've been looking at these cookies on my mom's counter for the last week, and he says, this is interesting because it's not easy to stay out of it. So that it's strange looking back, 40 years on that conversation. And for me, it had already become easy. So I had already got through it. It wasn't any big deal. I was probably 3 weeks in, and his first week, went through, and then he, of course, has completely dusted me on this guy. So his score is way higher GPA than I have in this. But neither one of us since that time, I would be the most susceptible, has been down in the pleasure trap since. I recognize it. I can feel it. I can feel the tug of it as I occasionally stick my toe in the water, but I'm never in it. I never have lost my preference for very healthy food. And of course, Alan has done nothing other than eat really healthy food. So, but we do feel it. I mean, he doesn't anymore, but I will feel it and I understand it. But it is, as Alan expresses the confidence that anybody can get out of this. It's a matter of just how much diligence you're willing to put one foot in front of the other. It might take you 30 days. It might take you 60 days. but you will get out because this is the nature of your psychophysiology. You just have to get working the right direction.
That's particularly true if people are in pain, psychological or physical pain over the issue. It really helps, you know, because one of the things that happens pretty quickly is inflammation tends to go down, so a lot of the physical pain starts to ease. And that's real to people. That's not, well, I'm hoping to delay infirmity 20 years from now. That's like, oh, my swelling and my pain or my whatever I'm worried about is immediately impacted.
Yes.
And that's also why patients with autoimmune disease tend to do a little bit better, because if they go back to eating greasy, fatty, slimy, processed crap, they feel bad again, often immediately. Whereas, you know, if you have high blood pressure, it may take you weeks of poor dietary choices before you can start to see some objective changes.
Well, I would encourage everyone watching that if they are stuck in the pleasure trap, that it's the greatest feeling in the world to get out of it. I was in it for 52 years until I had the privilege and fortune to meet both of you in January of 2011. I want people to know that you really can learn to prefer the taste of whole natural food. And it's the greatest feeling in the world to be out of the pleasure trap. As much pleasure as you think you're getting right now, the pleasure of being out of the pleasure trap is immensely more pleasurable.
We're actually doing a study right now, our first clinical trial at the True North Health Center, where we're actually able to objectify sensitivity to things like salt and sugar before and after fasting. And what we expect the results of the study to show is that there actually is a significant objective measurable change that occurs in people when they make diet and lifestyle changes, and even maybe faster with fasting.
Nice. Excellent. Well, thank you. So this question comes from one of our viewers. I get asked a lot, and you guys are both plant-based doctors. So this question is, why do so many of the other plant-based doctors say it's okay to eat sugar, salt, flour, drink coffee, chocolate, alcohol? Who is right?
Well, we're right. That's definitely the situation. It's only a question of how much time it'll take towards people completely come over to our way of looking at these things.
The correct way to look at correct way to look at things often, and this is one of these, is to be on a continuum. So so it isn't a matter of black and white; it's a matter of degrees on a continuum. So this is a think about most people. Maybe most people, 20% of their calories are healthy calories, and 80% of them are pretty mediocre. And a person, somebody that considers themselves pretty educated, pretty smart, has read a couple of diet books in their day, they're truly, they display some self-discipline around their food. Probably 30 or 40% of their calories are healthy, and about 60% of their calories are mediocre. You know, they have wine, they have lean chicken, you know, they have a little salad, they put some blue cheese dressing on it. They've got some carrots that they've, you know, cooked in olive oil. You know, they're health conscious people. And so with that thing that I just talked about, we're only getting out of there with 10% of the calories healthy. But if they do other things, you know, frosted mini wheats, you know, maybe they use almond milk. So maybe these people are having 40% of their calories healthy. Now, our plant-based docs, we know all of them, I think, and they're friends of ours, mostly. And they are. And so the thing is that everybody's got their matters of degree. And so I remember Essie and Alan arguing over the last 3%.
Well, you also have to be careful now. People like, for example, Dr. McDougall are trying to talk to the whole world because they're true evangelists. They want to convert the world to plant-based eating. And so they're trying to present a message that will have the biggest potential impact on the most people. That's not actually our particular approach. Our approach is to try to fine-tune this down, particularly for people that have specific health challenges. At the True North Health Center, a lot of our people are sick. And so what they might have to do may be different in terms of intensity and magnitude to the person that's basically healthy and, you know, just trying to, their goals may be different. They may not be as aggressive. And so you have to try to meet people where they're at in terms of giving them accurate information to meet the goals that they're setting for themselves. If your goal is to maximize healthcare, then you want to minimize the contribution of health compromising habits and behaviors. If your goal isn't necessarily, to the nth degree, then you may not have to carry it to that extent. And I think from some of our colleagues' viewpoints, if you try to oversell the fine-tuning of the program, you may lose a huge percentage of the population that might otherwise be able to make real legitimate progress, but aren't quite yet ready to carry it to the final fine-tuning degree.
Yeah.
If you're trying to teach the population that maybe alcohol is not the best thing, people should drink a lot less and be reasonable and be moderate, that's great. If your population you're working with are alcoholics, your message may have to be further refined.
Yeah, I think Alan's mission was that somewhere on this earth, there should be a place that when you come there, that we're not holding anything back, nothing. We're not leaving a single trick on the table. And everywhere else, they're going to leave a few tricks on the table for very reasonable reasons. And but Alan's thinking was, you know what, there's going to be one place where that, no matter how much trouble you're in, that this is the absolute best move that I know. And that's what this place is.
And ironically enough, that's where our name True North comes from too. There's a lot of different ways to try to get to some place. There's not just one way, but what we're trying to represent is the one that's most consistent, that's most on target, that's the shortest distance between 2 points. And there always is a shortest distance between 2 points. And that's what we're trying to do at True North Health Center, is trying to stay focused and stay on target to what we think is most consistent with reality.
Terrific. So how does the influence of other people affect someone's ability to get out and stay out of the pleasure trap? We have lots of people that have a health challenge. They're sick. They don't feel good. They're overweight. They want to change, but their spouse doesn't, their children doesn't. So how do other people affect whether or not somebody is going to ultimately be able to do this?
Well, other people can have an enormous influence on your situation. And so people are a hyper-social species, and it helps for people that have ever heard me speak on personality. I've only met one perfect personality for this problem. That's true. I've only met one. And when I went through the 6 bell curves that describe the human personality, there's only one person I know that fell consistently strongly on every side of the bell curve that was conducive to healthy living, and that's Alan. And so that's just how it is. And so if you happen to be with other people and you are agreeable, you're not so conscientious, you're so social, you've got some emotional instability of any kind, or you're just normal. If you're a normal person living with people that are going to be disagreeable, pushy, in any way disruptive to this, it's going to make it a lot harder. And so that's just the reality. There's no, it's kind of like saying, well, gee, how is it that, if I'm born in a foreign country and I don't know how to speak English, but I want to come here and I want to study, I don't know, American literature, how can I make it easier? Answer, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard because you're going to have a really hard time understanding the language, and you're going to have a really hard time writing the essays. Okay? In the same way that if your personality, if you're a normal person, if you have a social situation that is in any way hostile to this, it's going to make it a lot harder. So this is why I have the lecture of the perfect personality, to essentially, and also my lecture called Getting Along Without Going Along. These are 2 lectures to really try to triangulate to a few specialized little strategies for you to interact with other people in such a way as to clear out a little space to make it easier for you. Because most of us, don't have the perfect personality. I had a good one. It was not difficult for me because I'm quite reclusive. Alan would say I'm moderately disagreeable. Yeah, but I'm pretty conscientious. I'm moderately, I'm probably a little bit disagreeable, But what I really am is a recluse. And people don't know that about me. I say it, but they don't believe it, but it's true. And because that's true, when I was in high school, even though Alan's at the high school, you know, I got a friend at the high school and he's got a friend. We're not meeting for lunch. Okay. I go out and I eat my lunch in a sack under a tree in the park. That's what happened during high school. I was not around other kids.
You might have kind of.
that is really how it works. Okay. So I have not had a problem because I'm eating my meals alone 95% of the time. And so no problem. I'm perfectly happy this way. So Alan is even more set up with a disagreeable chip in there. There's no way anybody's going to socially pressure him. That's impossible. They're going to get
right. Oh, I know that. I've seen it. He's taken my cooking class.
He's real friendly about it. But it's like you're still steamrolled. You walk out of the room, that's it. So, but the issue is for normal people, if your social situation is not conducive, you're going to need a little bit of instruction. And so I would go to, in the pleasure trap, there's the original essay on that, getting along without going along, is right there. And those basic strategies are what it is that people need to try to step their way around these problems.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite chapters and one of the most useful. And listening to it just gives you so many tips and tricks on how to navigate these difficult social situations. Yep, if you are agreeable. Well, I have to ask you this, Dr. Lisle, because you had mentioned you'd started this about 15, but in high school you were eating your sack lunch under a tree. What was in the sack lunch during high school?
Yeah. Actually, we didn't know what we were doing for diet when I was 15. So in the sack lunch was a peanut butter and honey sandwich. And I was still drinking milk and probably eating an apple. It was an apple, peanut butter sandwich. And it's funny, I hadn't even thought about that in 40 years, but that is what it was. And I can remember when Alan figured this out, because he went and worked for a natural food store and he started reading everything on the shelves, and then he eventually found Shelton. And he found Shelton, a little tiny little piece of this that's funny is that he found Shelton because he made a friend there who's a grad student in botany by the name of Steve Plant. It's a true story. So then Alan insisted to me that this was the right direction. And I can remember the first day when I did not eat any dairy products. Is the first day that after basketball practice, I did not have debilitating cramps.
Wow.
So it is, as he says, there's nothing like if you've got a painful thing to change you. That is why I have never gone back, is because literally in 24 hours, I will be able to feel something of that magnitude. And it's been an incredible pleasure to not have cramps, have my stomach cramping as I had every single day of basketball practice for all the years that we played competitive basketball for junior high and high school. So that was over the first day that I became a vegan. And so, of course, I've never looked back.
Nice. What was in your lunch, Dr. Goldhammer, for high school?
Yeah, I don't remember. Actually, when I worked in high school, I think I ate my lunch at work. So I would have eaten whatever it was I was making up from because I was in high school. I was.
Yeah, but you were in New Moon.
Oh, yeah.
That's when you went.
So we had the New Moon Health Saloon. So that would have been we had fabulous salads, avocados. We had oranges that were growing on the trees in Vista. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good choices. Lots of sprouts.
We got it together our senior year of high school. It was the senior year. Yeah.
That's amazing. Is there anything you guys miss from your old days, from the first 15 years of life?
Did we miss? You mean like rich food miss?
Yeah. You miss like the cookies on your mother's counter or anything like that?
It's been so long. I don't know that I really have much recollection of it. And, I was fortunate. This was so early that, I never got into the really powerful pleasure traps. I never had a cup of coffee or an alcoholic drink or a cigarette or used drugs or did any of that. And you really don't miss what you don't know. It's much easier to just never mess with it than it is to try to, regulate it. So I don't know that I can be particularly sympathetic. I used to be a little bit critical of people that, would know what to do but would have trouble doing it. But, Dr. Lyle has explained to me that, you know, these loving, caring people that are concerned about what other people think can't really help it because it's their personality.
Ah,
so I'm no longer critical.
You guys talk a lot about dopamine in the book, and when I heard you lecture, and I've heard you say things like, you know, certain things artificially stimulate dopamine in the brain. Where did you learn all this about dopamine? Why is it so important, and how does this affect our ability to get out of the pleasure trap, our seeking this chemical?
I first heard about this from a psychiatrist who was lecturing on neuroscience. I believe his name was Alex Stalcup. And as soon as I heard it, I recognized the implications. He hadn't put it together that actually we didn't put it together about food. I came home thinking about that. And then one night we were talking in a tent at the hygiene conference. Now, I don't know where this was. The floor was hot. There was no air conditioning. It's like we were basically camping out. And we had a long discussion into the nighttime. And eventually you were all wrapped up about women and chocolate.
Oh, chocolate, yes. Yes.
Right, it was all wrapped up about it. He was noticing it just seemed like drug-like. And so we kept thinking about it, Eventually, we tripped over the notion that it had to be the same, essentially a similar process. And then when we consulted the scientific literature on it, then we did find that is in fact exactly what's happening. And so probably other people had made the argument before we wrote The Pleasure Trap. We didn't see it in anybody's book anywhere. This the notion that the foods were hijacking the very same pathways, are actually the correct way to look at this. Is the original dopamine pathway is there for food and sex.
Right.
It's actually drugs that have hijacked the food pathway.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then when you realize it's a simpler, there was a time when we're thinking about drugs and dopamine. I had also worked 2 years in an inpatient facility in Palo Alto at the VA hospital with drug and alcohol addicts. So I had been around, you know, high level. This was the flagship facility in Palo Alto, and fancy Stanford associated people are walking around there trying to figure out how to help people. And so I knew that I was near the cutting edge, and yet nobody was putting this together with respect to food that I was hearing. And you know, we could go back and maybe somebody did write something in 1996 or 1984, who knows? But no, the notion of addiction being centered around the dopamine pathway and then also the endorphin pathways for the opiate side. That was a fairly new idea. And also remember that Alan was obsessing over why it is that so many people, despite his personality and force and energy and apparent reasonable motivation, people were having such a hard time. So suddenly it was clicking that what we were looking, I can remember at one point thinking, why isn't everybody addicted? We may have had that conversation, I think we did, where I was like, why isn't everybody addicted to heroin? Why isn't everybody addicted to, now that I understand how this works, why isn't everybody addicted to cocaine? And I believe it was Alan saying, they are all addicted. And we started realizing a whole bunch of people are addicted to cigarettes, a whole bunch of people are addicted to coffee, a whole bunch of people are addicted to gambling, a whole bunch of, you know, it's like, turns out gambling later for a certain percentage of people is absolutely stoking the dopamine pathway. And then and the big one was, they all are addicted. They're all addicted to chocolate, they're addicted to Fritos, they're addicted to Coca-Cola. It's like, got it. You know, it fell into place. And then we had an answer to why it is that this is such a difficult process.
Right. So a little bird told me that both of you guys have new books in the works, and we're just wondering how long we have to wait to read the new books coming from you guys.
What a good question. So tell us, Dr. Lyle, how long, where are we at in the development of this new book that you're working on?
Well, it's going to be a while, so everybody can just wait. Everybody can just wait.
We are taking some time out though for Dr. Lyle to be able to focus and do some additional writing. So we recognize the fact that he has to be able to divert additional energies and time if we're going to be able to make consistent progress.
Yes. But his book's coming out sooner.
Yeah, the book that I'm associated with is going to be on fasting. It'll be out before the end of the year.
Terrific. Dr. Goldhammer, you just went off frame. Could you move a little bit? Thank you. Closer. And by the way, I just want to comment that people are saying how nice both of you look, that you're dressed similarly and you both look fantastic. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Bob from the Book Publishing Company for making this webinar possible for all of you guys to enjoy, and Dr. Gustavo Tolosa for doing the technology, without which we would be lost. And we've posted several links that you can purchase the book right now, either in the CD form on Amazon or Audible. So please click these links. And if you enjoy seeing these two doctors together, they will be both speaking at the Live Ultimate Weight Loss Conference in September on Labor Day weekend. And if you can't make it, we've posted a link to the live stream. So closing thoughts on anything, on inspiring people to get out of the pleasure trap, or how the book might help them. And we've got about 5 minutes left if you each like to take a few minutes to give us your closing thoughts.
So health results from healthful living. We know that now. So the only debate left to discuss is, what is healthful living? You know, our viewpoint, then the view that's very clearly expressed in the pleasure trap, is that healthful living involves diet, involves sleep, involves exercise. And there may be legitimate debate about how far do you need to carry these principles. The fact that the principles are going to be largely responsible for deriving health and happiness is not debatable in my opinion. So I think that the real power of the pleasure trap is it helps people understand just why it is such a challenge to do what is in fact very simple procedures, very understandable approaches, but why it's so difficult, because we live in a world designed to make us fat, sick, and miserable.
Great. Dr. Lyle, closing thoughts?
Yeah, this is the slipperiest thing imaginable. It's the sheer magnitude. Just to, I guess, to give my thoughts on this, is that this may be, you could say draconian political systems are the worst thing in the world. This may be the worst or second, and that is that the sheer quantity of human misery that is laid at the foot of this. This is the extraordinary other side of the sword of human achievement and greatness. Human beings in the last 100 years have taken the problem of deficiency and poverty out of the lives of a billion people or more. There's still a lot of it on the planet, but and the next century will probably eradicate that. But what we've now seen is that there's a other side to this bounty, and the other side of the bounty is an extraordinary problem of excess. And what we see is that people's lives are, even though they are enriched in so many ways by modern success, there's an extraordinary yang on the other side of this that is really not appreciated. And it's huge. I deal with this on a daily basis, talking to people who want to look better, to feel more attractive, to have their relationships work. And what stands between them and being there is the pleasure trap. Yeah. That we're not just talking about health. We're talking about happiness. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about self-esteem. We're talking about romance, love, sex, the things that are extremely important to people. We're talking about self-esteem in children as they grow, and their lack of confidence in their ability to compete and to be attractive, even attractive as friends or attractive as dating partners. It's like, wow, the sheer magnitude of human misery that is laid at the foot of this problem is immense. And as Alan says, it is not a complicated solution. It's not going to be solved by the fancy people working in genetics, that they're going to pull a gene out and then it's going to be fixed. No way. This problem is going absolutely nowhere. And the solution is right here. This is the solution. You have to walk this road. You got to listen to Chef AJ. You got to clean up your environment. You got to take a few tips from Alan about pushing back on other people. You got to clear out a social space, and you have to do it. And if you do it, then you get to walk a path where these problems aren't in your way. If you don't do it, then it isn't that there's anything wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you psychologically. It's just that the problem beats you. And it's like, we don't want the problem to beat you. And that's why we wrote this book.
Right. Well, thank you for writing it. You've helped so many people. Just let me read one of the comments to you guys. Debbie saying, love this. Thank you for such a great webinar. Annie said that, thank you to all of you for saving me from the world of food addiction and struggling to lose weight for 30 years. I love you all, and I love this interview today. Dr. Goldhammer and Dr. Lisle, you're the best. I couldn't agree more, Annie. And what's really great, you guys, is I know we couldn't get to all your questions, but both these doctors are very accessible. I typed both their websites in. If you go to healthpromoting.com, you can fill out the patient intake questionnaire to see if True North is right for you and get a free consultation from Dr. Goldhammer. And if you go to esteemdynamics.com, Dr. Lisle puts aside several slots a week where you can book a private consultation, and you can always listen to over 100 episodes now on iTunes or Blog Talk Radio of his weekly Beat Your Genes podcast. You can even call in live. So thank you all so much for watching. And please go right now to Amazon and pick up a copy of The Pleasure Trap in audio or in book form, or get it on Audible. And just know that getting out of the pleasure trap is probably the greatest thing you'll ever do. So consider doing it. And thank you both, Dr. Lisle and Dr. Goldhammer, for your time. Thank you, Dr. Tolosa. And thanks all of you for watching. Take care, everyone. Bye.